The mayor keeps stating that the property is owned by the Broome County Industrial Development Agency, and I'm not really sure that that's accurate. So if most with all the pilot agreements, which the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency, is able to, execute it, they do it through the normal state legislative mechanism where it's basically a purchase and lease back, right? So the Broome County IDA doesn't own Twin River Commons. It doesn't own 20 Holly Street Midtown Mall, but it has pilots agreements with all of those. It holds nominal title just to allow that tax exemption and incentive. When you go to IMO, the Broome County, the real estate online database, you find that each one of those properties that has a pilot is still listed. The owner that's listed is still the private entity that did the development, right?
Well, that's a good point, and I've noticed this curiosity in the past too, that in fact, say the buildings there on Court Street that are currently used by Boscov's and have been for nearly 35 years, yes, the official ownership name, according to the website, is Broome County Industrial Dev, but you look over for the address portion, the address says
Exactly.
Boscov's Department Store, 4500 Perkiomen Avenue in Reading. So, yeah, so all correspondence about the property would go to Reading, Pennsylvania, to the global headquarters of Boscov's Department Store.
Exactly. So it's for whatever reason, with this case, it lists Broome County IDA as the name of the owner, but the mailing address, like you mentioned, is still in Boscov's in Reading, PA. But it's even more interesting because the IDA has to submit annual reporting because it's a public authority, and all of their reports are online. And they have to send in a report every year of all the property that is under ownership by the IDA. If you look at that report, it does not list 11 and 13 Court Street, the Boscov's buildings, as properties that it owns. But to make this even stranger is that we're talking about extending the pilot agreement again another year or so they can figure out what to do. But the agency also has to report. The agency is also the name of the IDA. It has to report every year every pilot that it has active on properties. Boscov's is not even listed as one of the properties that it has a pilot. So how are we talking about extending a pilot agreement of a pilot agreement that doesn't exist? It's very strange. It doesn't really make any sense. I brought these questions to council last night during their legislative meeting, and I'm hoping that, Chris Papistrat and Danny Croncy, who are the council members to Binghamton Local Development Corporation, can figure this out. Now, the reason why the BLDC comes into play is because when I was on the board, when we had to consider a 5-year extension in 2013, the lawyers explained that if Boscov's were to walk out tomorrow, the property would revert back to the rightful owner, and the rightful owner is actually the Binghamton Local Development Corporation, not the IDA, not Boscov's itself, but it's actually the BLDC. And at that time, I was the only person who didn't approve the five-year extensions because I couldn't get answers as to whether this pilot even exists and why shouldn't the council be voting on this since it's a deviation from the standard pilot. So I think those same questions still emerge, like who owns this building? And how are we talking about extending a pilot when the IDA reports to the state that the pilot doesn't even exist? Do you know anything about that? Isn't that weird?
No, the short answer is no, and I have to admit, in terms of all the specifics about, and this dates back 35 years ago, all the specifics about the deals that have been done to, A, bring Boscov's to downtown Binghamton, and then over the years keep Boscov's in downtown Binghamton, in my estimation, a very small amount of the relevant information has ever been made public.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, yeah. I mean, it seems to me there are a lot of questions that have never been sufficiently addressed. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no online resource, cityofbinghamton.com/Boscov, where you can go for a complete roundup of all documents, all of the documents, including the current contract, the terms of the current lease, all the information one would need to understand what is going on to make an informed decision about the future of that property.
Right. And that's where, I just think some of that needs to be uncovered and fully understood and shared with the public before there's another vote on millions of dollars of public money going to support this project. And, apparently BLDC has a lease agreement with Boscov's, right? So it's basically Boscov's is the tenant. So the agreement, or I guess where there's leverage, is entirely with Mayor David and the Binghamton Local Development Corporation. Why he keeps trying to push all these responsibilities over to the IDA, I'm not sure, but it's a bit misleading, and I'm hoping the council can exercise its authority and actually get involved with this conversation before, again, we make a major commitment to public dollars without understanding the full, circumstances.
As you probably are aware, Matthew Ryan, on his final day in office, announced a lease extension for Boscov's department store. So that was on December 31st, 2013. So that lease extension ran through apparently May of last year. I don't know if it was May 1st of 2018. So, and according to the story that was written at the time, the agreement was reached involving Binghamton Local Development Corporation, Broome County Industrial Development Agency, and Boscov's. According to that lease agreement, based on the limited public information that was put out, it included Boscov spending $1 million on renovations of the building. And again, keeping in mind, this is a building they don't own. They're a tenant. So the last long-term lease, the 5-year lease that was announced by outgoing Mayor Ryan, included an investment of $1 million in renovations, including a roof replacement that was supposed to be completed in the summer of 2014. I believe they did that. It says, along with that provision, Boscov's would pay rent of $100,000 plus a 3% increase each year, and then the company also would pay the city $25,000 per year for use of the Water Street ramp, and that Boscov's may terminate the agreement with 1 year advance notice. It also stipulated Boscov's would allocate $30,000 every year for additional repairs and maintenance. But again, getting back to what I mentioned before, getting complete information, that was what was released by City Hall at the time. But before that and since then, there's never been a complete release of information about the scope of the agreements that Boscov's has with the City of Binghamton, with the Local Development Corporation, and with the Industrial Development Agency. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the deal, that I was the sole person on the board that didn't vote for it. And again, it's not that, I shop at Boscov's all the time, and I understand it's an important downtown anchor. But if if I couldn't get my questions answered fully by the lawyer as to how there still exists a pilot agreement and how BLDC can approve it without going before the council, I couldn't in good faith vote for it. I know my boss wasn't happy with me at the time, but I don't do what I'm told. I do what I think is right, and I think these questions are still unanswered. And I'm hoping the council can be transparent about this and share with the public what's really happening before we make another massive investment.